that have been released from MuleSoft just in the past few months. And just a quick high-level walkthrough of what's new. First thing, in October, we made updates to the Mule runtime version 4.4 and to Studio 7.11. And so the Mule runtime itself got some enhancements to the tracing module in terms of how the correlation ID and logging context are handled. And then within Studio, there's been some significant additions to the data weave language, such as the way the flows, typing is done, and there's some new modules in data weave around coercions, periods, maths, module improvements. Arrays are done, some performance improvements, namespace handling improvements, and such. So just some things there that you could look for if you didn't know those changes have been made. I'm going to share links to the what's new so you can look through on your time and sort of look at things that are relevant for you. All right, so that's what's new around the runtime and data weave. Also, another thing that's new is MuleSoft Composer standalone, or just MuleSoft Composer. If you've watched some of the videos at the channel, or if you've gone into some of the events, or just seen you're current with what's going on with MuleSoft, you know that we have a Composer for Salesforce. What's new here is Composer now runs in a standalone as well, so there's both options. And so it's targeted for enterprise teams who are trying to automate processes without code or clicks. So some of the more simpler types of integrations that you may want your business users to try and accomplish, they can do some of those themselves, such as connect data from Salesforce to Slack, or from NetSuite to Google Sheets, or there's around a few dozen, almost a few dozen connectors presently, and those are being released out at a really fast pace, and such. And so just helps organizations connect systems and automate some processes and such. And so what's new, it's a standalone solution. So the MuleSoft Composer, there's a Composer for Salesforce that runs in the Salesforce UI that's been around for several months now. And then, like I said, just available in October is the MuleSoft standalone. Now, what's going to happen in the first quarter of next year, and I know that says fiscal year 23, but that's going to be sometime between February and April of next calendar year. So between February and April next calendar year, we're planning of introducing capabilities so that Composer can work with artifacts created with Anypoint and that are maybe available in the Exchange, meaning system, process, experience APIs that you've built will be able to be accessed. So that's going to be available sometime first half of next calendar year. So look for those, and of course we'll have details for you out on the internet, as well as we will bring some of those here to a session after that announcement is made. And then in terms of our roadmap, I'm going to have a link about our roadmap where you can learn about some other new exciting things. We'll talk about that in a bit. So another thing that's hey, yeah, what's up?
Can I say one more thing about the Composer thing, because I was just noticing this from the releases as well. So initially that Composer was released with a certain number of connectors, like maybe a half dozen or something like that. So it really was a bit more, very, some of your easier or less complicated flows were really what they were targeting, right? And really kind of looking at that citizen integrator kind of use case scenario. Recently, like in the past couple of months, there have been a number of new connectors released for Composer as well that give you access to many other systems like ServiceNow, so you can do maybe some operations type or communications like that. So go out, and that's probably in that roadmap link as well. But you can always go out to the documentation for MuleSoft, docs.mulesoft.com, and click on release notes, and you will see in there a lot of new connectors that are now available in Composer. So from Salesforce being able to add those in. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I'll include a link to a blog post that has some information about that.
Okay, yeah, really great context. Thanks for adding those. Yeah, there are probably around 20 or so now, and they're adding in, and I'm looking at a roadmap schedule. They're adding in 3 to 4 a month on average, and so just sort of getting to them. So if there's not a connector today, the roadmap from the product team is to prioritize them based upon user customer wants, and then get those out on a very rapid pace. So um, there's a long list of things that are going to be done and delivered. So if it's not there yet, just take a look at the link that Jim's going to share. If it's not there now, it may show up next month or the next month. So or let me know, and I can provide some insight in terms of when you could expect something. All right. So the Composer, and like I said, I think the really innovation is around having Composer be able to access some of the APIs that you've built in Anypoint, right? Some of those system APIs, the process APIs that you might have built that are sitting in the Exchange. Having some of the business users access those is really going to unleash some of the capability of the solution in terms of integration. All right, really good. All right, so next, Partner Manager. So Partner Manager is a solution for enabling management of business-to-business trading partners through an EDI or B2B format type of transaction. So you may be familiar with an X12 type of 850 or a 210 type of 12 exchange, B2B exchange. There's a standard format for exchanging data that's been around for many years. And so we have a capability in Anypoint called Partner Manager, where you can rapidly configure partner configurations, trading relationship, document exchanges, and connect those into the enterprise application. So what's new, because this is a solution that's been around for quite some time, we're at the version now 2.9, and 2.9 supports VAN capability. So if you have a VAN that you're receiving documents from that you have already established, that this will work with those and such. Also, what's new is the addition to be able to receive types of documents into Partner Manager that traditionally would that wouldn't be thought of as like a structured B2B transaction document, like an XML or a JSON document. And so it further extends the types of messages that you can receive from your business partners. So in addition to an X12, maybe 850 or an Edifact type, now Partner Manager can receive something like an FTP via FTP, a JSON or XML document, and process it that way. And Partner Manager is just a really productive tool for establishing those trading relationships with multiple partners and be able to modify those, and gives you visibility to them and tracing ability and management ability of those partner relationships, and then connect them into your existing enterprise landscape through any of the system or process APIs you would have built. And this is something that's available right now. So you see that it was released sometime around October. Okay. So really good capability. And then there's a good blog post about what's new with it that I'm going to make gets pasted into the chat as well that you can look at. All right. And so that's APM, or Partner Manager. And then the event that I referenced is the Roadmap webinar. Jim spoke about the Mule Transform, and those are the days and times for the Mule Transform events. The Roadmap webinar is a separate event. And the Roadmap webinar specifically is going to go through what the MuleSoft roadmap looks like for the next, say, 6 or 12 months, and what we're building, what we're putting our investments in terms of product and such. So it's a great way to get a view on around what it is and where it is that MuleSoft is going and such. And so there's a link there where you can register for the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and click the link because there's a special way that, not a special way, however, what you'll do is you'll see it says on-demand webinar. Here you'll choose, do you want to see the 14th or the 15th session? And you can register for either or both, and just choose the one you want to see. and then fill out the registration form, and you'll be registered for the roadmap webinar. Again, those links will also get pasted into the chat, so you can have those. Okay, and then that was it. So just covered a few bases, and look for the links in the chat and also in a follow-up email. And that was all I had. Thank you, Jim. Thanks, everyone.
It's awesome, Mike. Thanks a lot. Mike, I just, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can I ask a couple of questions?
Of course, yeah.
Do you have, like, so as you know, recently, MuleSoft, Salesforce acquired Slack, and Slack is now kind of part of the, part of the ecosystem within Salesforce. Have you heard anything kind of internally from a MuleSoft perspective that you could share about how, about that relationship now, and how Slack can compare with, or about the interaction that Slack might have with MuleSoft and Salesforce together?
Yeah. There's a tremendous of initiative around further integrating Slack in a quite innovative way in all kinds of areas, right? So and then from a Salesforce perspective, there's a tremendous amount of innovation going on where Slack can be the interface, the single interface for interacting with all types of Salesforce. And then from a MuleSoft perspective, right, we have connectivity capability with Slack that further allows automation. So if you need any of the flows or processes to either initiate from Slack or integrate with Slack, that has been a capability of MuleSoft for quite some time, such that, say, a Slack automation maybe could kick off a MuleFlow, or those types of things, or certain activities that occur in the business need to initiate a connection to Slack through a MuleSoft Slack connector. And there's so much. And then certainly the Exchange contains templates and best practices for how those types of solutions can be done. There's tutorials out at the MuleSoft developer tutorials that give examples on how to work and integrate MuleSoft with Slack. So there's a lot out there. Just a simple Google search could uncover a lot, or just look at the MuleSoft site under developers tutorials. There's some stuff there. Yep. Good question. All right. I've been muted.
You're back. You're on mute, Jim.
Anybody else have any questions for Mike? Any thoughts on the material presented, or kind of what he's shared with us today about some of the new things?
I had a few comments, if I may.
Yeah, jump in there, Rahul.
Yeah, to your question about Slack, and I think the standalone Composer and the additional capabilities of Composer being able to call Anypoint APIs is going to be instrumental in taking that citizen integrator journey and capabilities further. That's always going to be in demand. I'm going to talk a little bit about it during my coexistence section, but integrating that with Slack, basically think about Slack as a workflow automation platform, right? So when you have cross-functional business processes that span across different systems, Slack is kind of the connective tissue where you can do work without swivel chairing between different systems, right? So Slack is where work will done, and then your business systems is where the data is stored, and there's additional business logic in there. But it's really powerful in enabling that cross-functional collaboration as you get into more complex enterprise business processes like order to cash, which is going to span several different systems. And you need so many approvals along the way from the different personas. You just push those approvals into Slack, click the button, and then it's approved and it's routed to the next system, and the workflow continues. So it's going to be very powerful and game-changing in delivering that experience for cross-functional collaboration and enterprise collaboration.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rahul. And
yeah, well said.
as you described that connective tissue, it reminds me of, I've seen this shared. I've seen an image shared by either Salesforce or on LinkedIn or something, but it shows a human body, right? And it shows the brain and then the nervous system and then
Mm-hmm.
the
Exactly.
other. And so MuleSoft kind of is in the middle of that, sending signals, like there's nerve signals, but then, that connective tissue that ties it all together, is Slack. I mean, it's really some really interesting stuff that, that Mark Benioff is sitting behind the desk kind of with his team,
And
kind of thinking of all of these ways that and the right platforms to invest in, right? Like if we all know that, uh, it was a really big investment when Salesforce bought MuleSoft, and then the Slack purchase came along and made that look small, and relatively
yeah, a fraction
speak.
of it,
So
right? But it
uh,
was, I think it was like it seems like the last mile, but it was the most challenging aspect. If you think about other BPM platforms that have existed previously, like I mean, WebMethods had one, and then there was Appian, and there's Pega, and all of those. To me, Slack is the modern workflow automation platform without all the heavy lifting that those platforms come with, right? And then actually, if you layer in the service trace acquisition, that takes it even further with the last mile serving a customer. So if you think about like I don't know how many people looked at the Dreamforce keynote, but there was an example presented during that of a customer emailing a PDF form to a wealth advisor, right? That's the typical way. And then the wealth management advisor may be out of office or on vacation, and the customer doesn't hear back for 4 or 5 days and is not onboarded, right? But with RPA, you can automate all that and you avoid all the redundant data entry into your system. You eliminate the need for a human to key in that data and whatnot. So really powerful capabilities coming in with the combination of RPA, Composer, and Slack.
right on. Awesome. All right. If any of you guys on the call, and again, we've got about 21 in the room. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, just feel free to drop them in the chat. The general chat is the one that I'm monitoring here. Rahul, without any further ado, I guess I'm going to hand this off to you to kind of get us started with the second topic of the day, which is how MuleSoft coexists in cloud native platforms, and what does that mean to us, on the call today? So, hand it over to you and take on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Michael. Very informative
Oops.
to know all of the enrichment and capabilities going on the Composer side and the Partner Manager. I remember Partner Manager from maybe 2-3 years ago, so it's come a long way, and it's exciting to see that. But back to the present topic, which is coexistence of MuleSoft with cloud native platforms and why that's important. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the background in terms of why that's important. What are the enterprise priorities that create the forces of that coexistence? Then we'll talk about some typical perceptions, myths, and threats to MuleSoft within an enterprise. And then we'll move on to what's the point of view around coexistence and I'll call out a few takeaways for all of us as part of the MuleSoft community. So in terms of background, let's take a look at what's going on in the enterprise. Who are the leaders on both sides, business and IT? Can you move it to the next slide?
I can. There we go.
Perfect. All right. So on the left side is the business and your business stakeholders, those who are now challenged with innovation, moving the top line or increasing revenue, staying competitive, preventing cannibalization of their business through competitors, especially as startups keep chipping away at the market share of the behemoths and the Fortune 500s. They're all challenged for not only staying competitive, but also their existence in the next 25 years, right? So that's the challenge in front of the business stakeholders. So the CMO and the COO, Chief Digital Officer, Chief Revenue Officer, all of them are tasked with protecting and moving that top line. And how do you do that? By enhancing the customer experience, getting as close to the customer, getting as much information to the customer, basically leading to that C360 view and providing that unique and seamless customer experience that increases that customer loyalty. Think of yourselves as a consumer and what makes you attach to certain brands and what makes you turn away from other brands, right? This is what these stakeholders are challenged with, right? So what does that mean for them? They're looking for packaged enterprise platforms that can scale globally, that delivers self-service to the business as much as possible, which means SaaS platforms, enterprise SaaS platforms. So multiple Salesforce clouds, NetSuites for ERP, Workday for employee and people, and Adobe for marketing. Even Salesforce has their own marketing cloud platform. They're now coming out with a loyalty platform, but it's basically sales, service, marketing, loyalty. All of that is your front office, right? So the business stakeholders are concerned with the front office. How do they improve business operations? How do they improve the customer experience? And improving the customer experience is very closely tied to how you provide service. And how you provide service means you need a C360 view of your customer, right? So how do you achieve that C360 view of the customer on your front office? That's where the back office comes in, and that's where IT is. You have IT, your CTOs or CIOs, or maybe an innovation officer, VP of IT and apps, and your enterprise architecture team, who are providing the governance and operationalization and maintenance of your back office platforms, Oracle's, the SAPs. Of course, you're going to have security, so I threw in Okta over there, but there's many others in that space. And most companies have a pretty decent legacy footprint, which is on-prem, right? And so IT is now tasked with the operations of the existing enterprise back office platforms, which is your ERPs and OMSs and WMS and transportation management, shipping, logistics, all of that, billing, but also tasked with modernization, or challenged with modernization, rather. So lifting from on-prem, moving applications to cloud. So anytime you are talking to an enterprise, you know there is going to be a cloud-native platform. The two most obvious ones in the enterprise space are Azure and AWS. GCP is making a push, but GCP's strengths are a little different from what AWS and Azure are able to bring to the table, and their entry points may be a little different. So you know there's already the presence of an infrastructure as a service provider, such as AWS and Azure. And MuleSoft helps provide that connectivity from front office to back office to help deliver that C360 view, to help increase that and improve and deliver those rich customer experiences, right? So that's the setup. So that immediately we can see how there's MuleSoft and how there's Azure or AWS. And now you're going to have different teams who will gravitate to what they like, or make the case for serverless, or Kubernetes and Azure and using .NET Native or Spring Boot, etc. Right? So that's where the challenges come up. So if we go to the next slide, what are the typical myths, perceptions, threats to MuleSoft? Even if you are implementing MuleSoft, there is a threat that somebody will come in, maybe an enterprise architect, and start pushing for mandates. Well, MuleSoft's too expensive. We can do this on serverless functions, which, by the way, I don't understand why they call it serverless functions. They could have given it a nice Greek name like Gamma or something. But, so you have serverless and you have the push for just pennies on the dollar infrastructure components that can be spun up in an elastic manner on your cloud native platforms. So there's always that perception of too expensive. Some IT is always challenged with cutting costs, not investments, right? And that's actually one of the points I brought up. I was in the CIO roundtable yesterday, Jim, with your friends, Matt McClarty and David Berlin. And during that chat, the conversation came up and I asked them, what are the investments you're looking to make and what cases are you making for investments? And they didn't have much to offer, right? So they're always getting challenged. They're not making the case for investment. And MuleSoft is an investment, but it does give you a significant return, not only on your dev costs, but also on speed and reduction of effort, project over project. But IT is thinking, how can I cut $100,000 over the next 3 months? And that doesn't give you the runway for investments, if that's the thinking, right? So that's why there's this perception out there of too expensive. There's also a little bit of perception of too complex as MuleSoft introduces more capabilities. So Partner Manager, CloudHub, there's RTF, there's Edge, there's Titanium monitoring and whatnot, Composer, RPA, Slack, etc. All of those are coming into play. And, you know, we all know that as we take our developer certifications and the MCIA, it's not an easy test. So there is a developer background and a developer persona that's required to pick up MuleSoft. And then there's this perception or just this mindset, we can build it ourselves, right? That we don't need an iPaaS. We don't need all the capabilities that the iPaaS offers. We're only using 15% of it, so we can go custom build it ourselves. We don't need 3-tier architecture. I talked to a few architects yesterday for one of our accounts, and they were all like AWS custom build. And they didn't even understand the value of the 3-tier architecture. And their perception was, yes, the slide is showing correctly. And their perception was that, why are you making all these calls when you can consolidate all that into one flow? Right? So there is this perception out there, or not perception really, it's a reality, that custom build is a thing, and it's two different paradigms, and it tends to result in some religious debates and whatnot, or philosophical debates architecturally, right? So those are, to me, the 3 key challenges. So even if you are implementing MuleSoft and there's Azure or AWS elsewhere in the enterprise, that does create a threat. So we should be mindful of that as a MuleSoft community, that regardless that MuleSoft's present, there will be a threat. There will be some stakeholder out there who will start pushing and bringing up these perceptions and myths and obstructions, right? So I think we need to be mindful of that. And that's going to lead us to the next slide, which I'm going to talk about what's the MuleSoft value and how do you present that value.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Rahul, let me just kind of throw in here as well. You know, if you're in an organization who is just now making that transition into cloud, right? And so maybe they've already, you know, they already had some integration. And this, I'm thinking of a client from a few years ago back. Kind of, it would have been around the Mule 3.9 timeframe, you know, where they're just starting to kind of make this move to the cloud, but everything's been local, right? Everything's in their own data center, and they've decided to, let's say, move to AWS and begin to take and shift their line of business applications into AWS. Sometimes there's a lift and shift that happens, right? They try to do a 1-for-1, right? Like Well, let me
Yep.
just spin up an EC2 instance that's really
Exactly.
big, and a data store, on RDS, and
Yep.
then and it's going to look just like it did in the data center, only now it's in a different data center, right?
Exactly.
Versus a different mindset of saying, okay, well, this is what the line of business system used to do. So I'm going to lift and shift the functionality, but I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to either create some web pages that maybe do the execute the functionality that used to be on-prem, and I'm gonna build integration, kind of with more of a microservices mindset, which is really
Mhm.
what this 3-tier. If you look at the MuleSoft 3-tier architecture of experience process system, you're really talking about building microservices between applications, so that you end up with an application network, right? And that application network has power that you didn't have before. So how much of this, of the threats to MuleSoft come in the form of uh, of the way that a company has chosen to migrate their data centers into the cloud versus just the cloud componentry itself? Does that make sense?
I understand where you're going with it. And then let me try to address a couple of points. So there's two flavors of microservices. MuleSoft provides stateless microservice APIs, whereas cloud native microservices are stateful. They're replacing a monolith. You're decomposing a monolith functionality into microservices. They actually maintain state and serve a particular domain, right? So two different flavors. So one is actually serving backend functionality. That's sitting on cloud native, decomposed microservices paired with a data store. And then there's MuleSoft with stateless APIs deployed in a microservices manner, so still domain oriented, with multiple layers of abstraction, providing a very specific purpose for each layer. And at the end, it's leading to consumption. That's where microservices do not just enable integration. So if you're building a backend microservice which exposes endpoints, that's not integration, because the burden of integration is on the consumer in that scenario. So that's where MuleSoft helps by taking on that burden of integration and driving consumption and providing that abstraction and ensuring that the front end and the consumer don't have to do the lifting and are delivered the experience that they need to. Right? That's the value of MuleSoft. And yes, there is the movement of lift and shift. I don't think that necessarily introduces a threat. I think the threat comes when they start talking about, I can do this on serverless. I can do this on Kubernetes and these micro containers and micro machines and all that. That's the threat, because those are pennies on the dollar. And they compare it to the cost of the MuleSoft platform, which is not really a fair comparison, because you're comparing it to an iPaaS. You're comparing an IaaS to an iPaaS. It's not, you have to factor in the total cost of ownership, the design and the development needed. Not only that, but also the processes. Most shops that take on the step, um, let's face it, we do have customers who have moved off of MuleSoft to go native. They don't even have the processes in place to get the return from that migration off of MuleSoft. That's the value of MuleSoft, is that it's not only a platform, but it also makes the whole process very easy. The whole API lifecycle is well baked, and everyone else has to bake it themselves when they decide to go cloud native, and they miss all these steps, and they don't even lead with contract design. So stuff is going to break because you don't have a contract. Most cloud native initiatives don't even have Swagger Hub for contract design. And then when you try to bring your contract, first of all, your mocking service is sitting on Swagger Hub. It's not sitting on your API gateway in Azure or AWS. Then you have to bring that contract over into your gateway and actually manually write request validators for schema validation. Whereas in MuleSoft, it's all built in out of the box functionality. You don't even have to think twice about it. So all that swivel chairing, nobody factors in how much stuff is going to break and how much that extends the full development lifecycle, the timelines, and how much it really breaks the experience. Because if somebody decides to make a change on the front end or the consumer side or the back end, there's no contract. You just had a conversation, then you put together a data model which is not part of a contract, right? So that's a major gap in that implementation, and also the whole consumption aspect and abstraction. There's no abstraction. All it is, hey, I'm a microservice. I'm going to offer you what I care to offer. And then you, consumer, the burden of consumption is on you. And you're going to have to tightly couple and go point to point. That's not integration, right? That's not a strategy. It is an approach, but it comes with several sub-optimizations and compromises.
Awesome.
You know.
All right. Thanks for that sidebar there. Sorry about that. I
No
hope I
problem.
didn't derail you. I'm going to jump to the next slide, Rahul.
You did not. I'll pick it right back up. All right, we're going to talk about the MuleSoft value, and we already spoke a little bit about it. But I love this slide. So a few of the MuleSoft account execs had posted this on LinkedIn. So I took the liberty to screenshot that and stick it in here. You look at this picture, and this platform delivers connectivity to all of this. And there's actually another slide that I wished, if I knew Michael yesterday, I would have pinged him and asked him for it. I know there's another slide that shows how MuleSoft captures the capability of so many other platforms. I think there's like 70, 80 platforms listed on that one slide. And all of those capabilities are captured in MuleSoft as one platform. And that's a very powerful slide. Pictures are, more valuable than words. And to me, this picture with that picture that I'm referring to just truly is a very compelling statement of the value that MuleSoft brings. But I think the other thing that MuleSoft brings is abstraction and consumption, which is forgotten when you run into the biases of custom development. And I think that's a message we need to factor into our reframe. It's not just unlocking of data. Actually, the value comes from that plus the consumption and abstraction. Those are two key things that cloud native is missing. They don't believe in the multiple layers of abstraction. Right. So the reason I'm highlighting this is because we as a MuleSoft community are always facing those threats of the value of the platform that we're working on. And I think, as I mentioned before, we should be mindful and we should always communicate that value and be evangelists, not just developers. But beyond that, I would say, I think it's compelling and important to build in KPIs and dashboards to show the value. So tracking the life cycle from contract design to deployment in production or deployment in UAT. I think most people would be familiar with the MuleSoft like CVAs, value assessments and whatnot. And I know that we land, when we show the value of MuleSoft, we talk about development effort to be south of 200 hours to get it into test, right? So the KPIs to show the value are going to be very compelling, and those are mostly missing. And I would say most implementations are missing that. So I think that's a key thing that we could take on. Think of how to communicate the value and show those KPIs. It'll go a long way in making the statement of the value being realized.
I've Rahul, kind of on that point. I've seen clients, that have tried to they've tried to correlate just creating like like you talked about earlier, just creating a Lambda, right? Like, let me create a Lambda function and I'll build an API front end, that I'll expose through API gateway, right? And I'm done, or I think I'm done. And that takes me, X amount of hours, right? And they kind of try to map that to building that in MuleSoft, right? And the cost around MuleSoft. But really that simple scenario of just creating that Lambda that's called by this API gateway component, that's not the full story. And that's not an apples to apples comparison, as you were describing. So I think you're right. I think it's important when you're talking about MuleSoft value, and as the development community here, every time we get together as a community, and we are walking through different scenarios, or we're looking at, low level, more the a technical, bottom up view, where we're, looking at data, hey, how do we do this data weave, right? Like we're looking at specific technical capabilities, but at the end of the day, that rolls up to an overall cost, right? And that can be misperceived by either our management or leadership in the business, as when they're trying to do a one for one comparison. And so I think that's a good call out, Rahul, that we need to, it's helpful if we can, show truly what the value is across the MuleSoft landscape, because it is a platform, not just integration.
Yeah, it's not just a data movement pipe. That's what Lambda is. All right. So if you're trying to deliver an experience,
can I
don't
add
think,
just one value on that GMDP here? So also, I think that another important thing that brings up MuleSoft when it offers us this API layer, different layer availability, right? This Lambda, basically that just does the job of connectivity, but beyond, when we come to products and support, MuleSoft plays an important role, because we are talking all the layers in the same environment and we have expertise available. And I have really seen those added value coming out from those when your base layer or root layer is kind of connecting with any of this diagram what you are listing over here.
yeah, and to be honest, Lambda is not even a connectivity. It's just a compute to offer to run some app code, right? So it's actually, you just run some logic on a compute vehicle. That's what Lambda is. The connectivity comes from, typically you would have an SQS, and then there's a listener, and you need like 8-9 different AWS components to actually make one thing happen. And then good luck doing root cause analysis in a revenue facing scenario, where something goes down and you start to lose revenue, and looking to triage that without a robust log aggregation, correlation, and telemetry. It's going to be really challenging, and that's where the ROI breaks down. So now you're losing revenue by stitching together, and you thought you saved a few $100,000 to run pennies on the dollar infrastructure, but you took an hour outage and you lost 500,000 in revenue right there. So one outage can cost you all of that perceived savings that you think you will get in dev costs, or just the platform savings. So there's lots of blind spots in that approach, and I'm still working on creating my talk track around that and highlighting those, because every time I'm challenged with MuleSoft versus going cloud native, I like to highlight all of the risk areas, and when they don't have those answers, that's when the aha moment is that, oh, you know what, we're not ready for that. But they will come back a year later and have the same conversation, and they'll have addressed one of the 100 points that I've raised of the rest, right? So the key is to challenge them with how monumental of a journey they are in for, when they're trying to go bake it themselves. So with that said, I think we can move to the next slide. So coexistence, and I really like this slide because it kind of talks to the value of MuleSoft and how it can coexist with cloud native platforms. To me, it's not replacement, but it's coexistence. There is a purpose that cloud native platforms serve, and they serve it very well. But there's also a purpose that MuleSoft serves, and it serves it very well. There are two different purposes, right? And then you add in all of the stuff that I mentioned in the beginning when I was giving the background, which is what is the business challenge that an enterprise faces, and what are the C-level folks worried about, which is protecting their top line or increasing the top line, staying competitive and viable, which means stickiness with the customer, lowering your customer acquisition, improving customer stickiness, and customer satisfaction scores, right? So when you talk about that, it's all about the front office. And that's where the value of MuleSoft comes in. When you're talking front office, customer experience, customer 360, all those connected experiences, throw in Slack, throw in RPA, all of that is significant tailwinds and jet fuel for MuleSoft, right? So leverage every time you're implementing MuleSoft, if you think about why you're implementing it, what's the business and the functionality that you're delivering, it should be mostly catered to customer experience. We all know about the 3 layers of MuleSoft. I'm not going to go into those, but I talked about the value of not only unlocking, but driving consumption. And then on the cloud native side, they serve a huge purpose on decomposing monoliths with microservices. You write native code, C# on Kubernetes sitting on a Microsoft machine. That all makes sense architecturally. There's a purpose. You go domain oriented on your microservices. You can deliver backend functionality faster. But you need that abstraction from MuleSoft to deliver the experience and consumption. So that's really the point of view around the coexistence, is separation of duties, right? And playing to the strengths. And the separation of duties on cloud native platforms is all of the components as a service that you can spin up in an elastic manner, create microservices, deliver functionality faster, right? MuleSoft can help with the abstraction and manage that change up to the front office. And there you have it. You're serving a better customer experience. You're responding to market forces faster, because transformation is not just implementing a new platform on the front office. Transformation is also speed. And if you're not on a 3-month release train, I'm not convinced you're transforming, right? So after your first project or 2, you should be on a 3-month release train where the business gets features every 3 months, meaning your dev and test cycles are now being reduced to 8 weeks, right? That's where you should be. And that's the power of the API-led microservices approach. Combine that with microservices on the back end on cloud native, which are stateful. That's how you get to that 3-month release train. So that's the point of view. Jim, I see you shaking your head. I'm sure you have questions or thoughts.
No, I think that's I think your metric there is interesting, and I'd love to hear kind of what others think about about that. I know that many of you guys are consultants. Some of you guys are we've kind of got a mix of consulting and industry. Would love to hear what you experience from a release train perspective, and if you are kind of in that 3 months 3-month new functionality space, or how are what do you see within your own business with regards to that? If anybody has anything, would love to either hear you. Just feel free to jump in, unmute, and add comments, or drop it in the chat, and we'll keep going. And if I see anything drop in there, we'll bring it up. But I think that's a good point, Rahul. I think that's what people, that's what the C-suite wants to see, as they move into these cloud native platforms, right? They're the selling point on that is, hey, reduced cost because I'm only going to run what I need to run at a particular time, right? And I can scale up, I can scale down, I can do that much easier than I could in a data center where I'm having to, pull something in off of the loading dock and install it. And back in the old days when you had to wire up your your servers and rack them and stack them and everything else. So they're looking at this and saying, how can I go faster? And then where I see kind of the MuleSoft bit playing in is that reuse, right? So as you're building these components, you're not just thinking of a point to point solution that solves a problem today. You're thinking about how can I turn this into a an API that can be used by other by things I haven't even thought about yet, right? Like things that are yet to be developed, and and I'm going to get that a lot of that time to market benefit out of competing in that space of reuse, and I think that's kind of what helps
And
get us to that 3-month window as well.
and actually, I will say most customers that have implemented MuleSoft get value faster on MuleSoft than value from their cloud native implementations. I have a customer who has not gotten one go live on their cloud transformation over 2.5 years, but they're live on MuleSoft. They went live within 8 months, right? So
Yeah.
the value that you can choose to move platforms from on-prem to cloud, but if you don't change your processes, you're still not getting the value. And that's a monumental shift for a lot of these shops that still have on-prem processes, even though they're using AWS or Azure. So
Awesome.
you start building an on-prem layout on your AWS, you've effectively made it on-prem. In effect.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of maturity needed to evolve, and that evolution is still in its infancy. So there's a long journey to get value from cloud services, but MuleSoft delivers value immediately.
Outstanding. Thanks a lot, Rahul. I think this is the last slide, isn't it?
Yes. So just to summarize, I mean, the takeaways, what I would say is always be mindful that there are myths, perceptions, and threats. Always be evangelizing the value and look for ways to implement KPIs that show the value. Because at the end of the day, when somebody comes in with objections, data, rationale without data is just hearsay, right? But if you can present the data, that's when you have the win and you can persuade and convince. So those would be my takeaways that I want for you.
Thank you very much, Rahul, for sharing this with us today. This is, sometimes we in here, everybody that's kind of in this group, we try to attack or we try to present different points of view and at different levels of granularity. So, I think having this strategic view of the space we all occupy in our clients and in our businesses day to day is really helpful. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time to do this. All right, so let's jump over to fun time. So first of all, I want to make sure that everyone shares this event and shares these events in the future with social media. So if you've got a Twitter account or a LinkedIn account or MySpace, does anybody use MySpace anymore? Is that still around? Make sure you're tagging this event and helping to share what we're about in the Houston MuleSoft Meetup group. Love having everybody on here and participating. I'd love to hear if you guys have any any topics in the future that you would like to hear about, or that you would like to even present. I would love to hear that, and feel free to suggest something that you would like to present, and we'll get you on the agenda for the next one. And if you do, I think we're going to be trying to get this set up as a live event in Houston, probably in the new year. We're starting to kind of see things open up a little bit from a pandemic perspective, and so I'm really hoping to get to a place where we can get together and see each other face to face. Okay, so let's see what's next. So let's before we go to what's next, let's play a little trivia. And the way we're going to do this today, since we've got such a small group, well, I think there's 17 of us still. Okay, so I'm going to put into the chat just a demarcation line. And the first, let's see, I don't know if that worked actually. Okay, so there we go. The first correct answer after this line will be the winner of a new, a brand new MuleSoft instructor-led course. So let me think of a trivia question to ask everyone. So Rahul talked about two different competing groups, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually look at what this slide looks like, because I'm going to ask this question. Okay, Rahul asked about or talked about two different enterprise stakeholders and priorities. Tell me what the two different stakeholders and priorities were. How did he separate out those two initiatives? There was a slide called Enterprise Stakeholders. Had the Salesforce bear on the left and Einstein on the right. What were the two groups? Anybody have I hope I didn't make this too hard of a trivia question. All right, we've got one answer. Rom, that's not what I was looking for. This is the there's a group that includes, let me change the let me see, somebody, oh, okay, so we got CEO, CIO versus Mule dev and architects. Let's see, Rahul, what do you think? Is that a DP's got CEO, CIO versus Mule devs and architects? Is that do you count that as a good answer?
It's close, but not close
Yeah.
enough.
I've got front office versus back office.
That's closer.
That's a little bit, yeah, that's a little bit closer. Madava, good guess there. Stakeholders and developers. No, not, I mean, kind of in a sense, perhaps. I guess I'm looking for too specific an answer.
They were stakeholders on both sides.
That's
right. Out which ones they were.
Yeah. So here we were talking about. Let me just. Here's what I'll do. Okay, I'm going to put a pause on this. I am going to start a new line. Okay. So okay, here we got Madava's got front office versus back office, marketing and sales versus IT and Mule integrators. Rahul, do you want to capture that? Do we capture that as a answer? What do you think? This is not a this is just kind of all for fun. Is this
I think the front office, back office is the closest.
Front office, back office is the closest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to capture that. We're going to go with that. Okay. So
Yeah.
front office, Madava, if you will send me your email address so that I can get a hold of you, I will send you the information on how to redeem your new course training material. You can send me a direct message or you can put it in here. Oh, he's already won recently. Okay. This is hard. Okay. I'll make this next one really easy. All right. How many new connectors are there for both Anypoint Platform and Composer combined? Okay, who's the first? Oh, I said combined. Some people tried to jump in quickly. Shafula, I think I said that right. Shafula, you are correct. There are 16 new Composer connectors that I shared in that link. Great job. So Shafula, if you will email me or send me, I'm going to send everybody my email address. I'm going to put it right in here. It is, I mentioned it earlier on a slide. I think I mentioned it earlier, but you can all reach me at this address, jim.andrews@saleme.com. So Shafiullah, congratulations. You're a trivia winner. Let's do one other. Okay, so Rahul, can you think of one? I'm trying to think of one that would be good to go with your presentation. So let's see. I know, perceptions. Okay, so here's the new question. So we talked about perceptions, myths, and threats to MuleSoft. Name two? And I'll put in a line here. Okay. Too expensive and too complex. Aha, DP. Oh, wait a minute. Do we have one before that? VJ, too expensive, too complex, and we can build it ourselves. You got all three. All right. So VJ, you are VJ Kulte. You are our winner, DP. Doggone it. I know you've won several. That is the correct answer. So VJ, if you will send me your email address, then I will capture that. And I'm going to, Shafala, I will put you in my little notepad here. Okay. And then VJ, send me got you. Cool. So, okay, great. I will send you guys an email and let you know how to redeem your training. One more question I'm going to try to come up with. That's a good one. All right. So the very last slide, Rahul was talking about kind of the way that you can coexist, that MuleSoft can coexist, and some of the places that we can look at coexistence. So one was Portal and Salesforce in the engagement layer. Name the other two major boxes that were involved in the coexistence that Rahul showed. Bingo. Amen. You are quick to the punch there. Okay. Data center and Azure cloud and services. That's fantastic. That is the correct answer. So Amen, Kuwaja, congratulations. You are a trivia winner. So share your connection information and I'll make sure that I add you as well. And we'll get your get you set up with training. All right, that is all I've got for today. I hope that you guys all found this this interesting and worthwhile and worth your joining us on this journey. Do do me a real quick favor. Have one big favor for the 15 of you guys that are left. You're going to get an email, and it's going to be a survey. Please fill this out, and however you think it went, good, bad, indifferent. Let us know. Let us know how we could make it better in the future, and also add your recommendations, specific recommendations for what we might be able to present here in the future, that you would love to hear about, because we are always looking for ideas. I sit in on a number of other MuleSoft meetup groups, and I try to get ideas from there. But this is our Houston space, and this Houston MuleSoft meetup, I want to make sure it's covering needs that that you guys are interested in seeing discussed. So when you get that survey, it's a very short survey. Please fill it out and share it with us, because I will look at that over the next week as we begin to plan for our next community meetup. Thank you guys all for taking times out of your day, especially over lunch. I appreciate it, and I really look forward to seeing you guys all in the future. Ravi, a special thanks for, I know you're joining from a
Yeah,
long
thank
ways
you very
off.
much. Yeah, thank you very much, Jim and Rahul. I really liked this session because, like, just talking, throwing some slides and talking about product, you people really talked about your experience, what client is talking about, what industry is talking about. Yeah, ideally, this is the way actually we should have the sessions. Uh, in one way or other, people are already working in the product. We know what is happening, but real experience should be shared. Yeah.
I, I,
Yeah. Thank you very much
I
for
I
appreciate the
really
sharing
feedback.
the
appreciate
best.
that
Yeah.
feedback coming from you, Ravi. If you guys don't know Ravi, he leads a meetup group it's not
From
Bangalore, it's
yeah, Vishakhapatnam and Hyderabad from India.
at Hyderabad, right? So, and I have joined. In fact, I joined his very first meetup group. It was like 4 in the morning Houston time on a Saturday. So if you guys have not joined his meetup group, highly recommend it. They are very entertaining. He's got great creativity, and just really can't recommend it anymore. And so Ravi, the feedback that you gave us just there, I really do appreciate it. That means a ton to me. So thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for joining.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Yeah.
All right, bye guys.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks. Bye.
Rahul.
You bet. Thank you.